Hello, friends. There is a provision buried inside Social Security law that most married couples have never heard of. Not buried in the sense that it is difficult to find if you know where to look. Buried in the sense that SSA has never made a meaningful effort to explain it to the people it most directly affects. And the people it most directly affects are spouses. Specifically, the spouse who will one day be left behind. The one who will wake up one morning without their partner and walk into a financial reality that looks completely different from what they expected. Partly because of grief, partly because of how Social Security actually works, and partly because of this one provision that nobody ever sat down and explained to them while there was still time to do something about it. I am going to explain it today. I am going to tell you exactly what this provision is, how it works, what it does to survivor benefits in specific circumstances that are more common than most people realize, and what married couples can do right now, together, while both spouses are still here, to protect the surviving spouse from a benefit reduction that the law allows, but that nobody ever warned them was coming. Because here is the truth about this provision. It does not announce itself. It does not arrive as a warning. It activates quietly at exactly the moment when the surviving spouse is least equipped to navigate it, in the immediate aftermath of losing their partner, and it can permanently reduce what they receive every single month for the rest of their life. Stay until the very end, because the last thing I cover today is the specific action that couples can take right now that directly limits how much damage this provision can do, and it is an action most couples never take, simply because nobody told them it existed. And if SSA Now is where you come to find out what Social Security law actually does before it does it to you, subscribe right now and turn on No. The provision I am describing today is in the law right now. It is affecting surviving spouses right now. The people who find out about it in time can prepare for it. The ones who find out after cannot undo what it already did. Let me start with what this provision actually is. The provision is called the Government Pension Offset, and if that name sounds familiar, it is because it has been discussed in certain policy circles for years. But the gap between how often it is discussed in those circles and how often it is explained to the ordinary married couples it affects is enormous, and the consequences of that gap are landing on surviving spouses across the country in a way that produces genuine financial shock at the worst possible moment. Here is what the Government Pension Offset does. If a surviving spouse receives a pension from a federal, state, or local government job that was not covered by Social Security, meaning the job did not pay into Social Security through payroll taxes, SSA reduces their survivor benefit by 2/3 of the monthly pension amount. Read that again slowly because the math matters. 2/3 of the government pension amount is subtracted from the survivor benefit every single month. Not a small adjustment, not a rounding difference, 2/3. Which means that for a surviving spouse receiving a government pension of $1,500 per month, a number that is not unusual for a retired teacher, a state employee, a municipal worker, a federal employee under certain retirement systems, SSA reduces their survivor benefit by $1,000 per month, every month, permanently. If the survivor benefit they were entitled to was $1,400 per month, the government pension offset reduces it by $1,000, leaving them with $400 per month instead of $1,400. If the 2/3 calculation exceeds the survivor benefit amount entirely, the survivor benefit is eliminated completely. They receive nothing from Social Security on their deceased spouses.
This happens to teachers. It happens to firefighters, to police officers, to state university employees, to federal workers under the civil service retirement system, to municipal employees whose jobs never paid into Social Security. People who dedicated careers to public service and whose spouses worked in the private sector building Social Security earnings, only to have the surviving spouse discover at the worst possible moment that the benefit they were counting on has been dramatically reduced or wiped out entirely by a provision they never knew existed. Drop a comment right now and tell me, did you know the government pension offset existed before watching this video? Because what I hear from people consistently is that they discovered it at the exact moment it activated, when they called SSA after losing their spouse, and that the discovery landed like a second blow at a moment when they had no capacity to absorb it. Now, let me tell you about the second provision that interacts with survivor benefits in a way that produces equally significant but less commonly understood reductions. This one is called the Windfall Elimination Provision, and while it primarily affects a retiree's own Social Security benefit rather than survivor benefits directly, its interaction with survivor benefit calculations creates consequences that couples planning around a combined retirement income rarely see coming. Here is how the Windfall Elimination Provision works. If a retiree receives a pension from a job that was not covered by Social Security and also worked enough in Social Security covered employment to qualify for their own retirement benefit, SSA modifies the benefit formula used to calculate their Social Security retirement benefit. The standard formula gives lower earners a higher replacement rate on their earnings, a feature designed to provide more proportional support to people who earned less over their careers. The windfall elimination provision
reduces that replacement rate for people who also receive a non-covered pension, on the theory that their overall retirement income is higher than their Social Security earnings record alone suggests. The result is a Social Security retirement benefit that is lower, sometimes significantly lower, than the same earnings record would have produced without the pension. And because the survivor benefit is based on what the deceased spouse was actually receiving, a benefit that was reduced by the windfall elimination provision produces a correspondingly lower survivor benefit for the spouse left behind. The interaction between these two provisions, the windfall elimination provision reducing the deceased spouse's Social Security benefit and the government pension offset then further reducing the survivor benefit the surviving spouse receives, can produce a combined effect that leaves a surviving spouse with a fraction of what a straightforward calculation would have suggested they were entitled to. This is not theoretical. This is happening to couples right now who planned their retirement around a combined income that included Social Security survivor benefits, and who are discovering, after one spouse passes, that the benefit they planned around was never going to be what they expected. Now let me tell you what couples can do about it. The most important thing to understand is this. Neither the government pension offset nor the windfall elimination provision is something you can simply opt out of if the conditions that trigger them apply to your situation. They are written into federal law, and SSA applies them according to that law. What you can do is understand them early enough to plan around them, adjusting retirement income strategies, benefit claiming decisions, and household financial structures in ways that reduce their impact rather than discovering their full force after it is too late to respond. The first action couples should take, and this is
the one most couples never take, because nobody tells them to, is a joint SSA benefit review while both spouses are living. Call SSA at 1-800-772-1213 and ask specifically about how the government pension offset and windfall elimination provision would affect your household survivor benefits given your specific pension and Social Security earning situation. Ask SSA to show you the calculation. Ask them to project what the surviving spouse would receive on the deceased spouse's record under both provisions given the pension amounts currently in play. This conversation is free. It takes less than an hour, and what it produces is an accurate picture of what the surviving spouse will actually receive, not what a back-of-the-envelope calculation suggested, not what a well-meaning family member estimated, not what feels intuitively correct based on how much the working spouse paid into Social Security over their career. The actual number, with the provisions applied, in advance of the moment when acting on the information is still possible. For many couples, this conversation surfaces a gap between expected survivor benefit and actual survivor benefit that is large enough to change how they approach retirement savings, life insurance, pension election options, and Social Security claiming timing. The gap does not disappear because you know about it in advance, but knowing about it in advance gives you options that discovering it afterward does not. The second action, understanding pension election options at the time of retirement and how they interact with survivor protection. When a spouse retires from a government job and begins receiving a pension, they typically face a choice between different pension payment options. A single life annuity pays the highest monthly amount, but stops when the retiree dies, leaving the surviving spouse with nothing from that pension going forward. A joint and survivor annuity pays a lower monthly amount during the retiree's
life, but continues paying a portion, often 50 or 100%, to the surviving spouse after the retiree's death. The relevance to the government pension offset calculation is direct. The offset is calculated based on the pension amount the surviving spouse receives, not the pension amount the deceased retiree received. If the surviving spouse receives a 50% joint and survivor annuity, the offset is calculated on that 50% amount, rather than the full original pension. A smaller pension amount produces a smaller offset, which means a larger remaining survivor benefit from Social Security. This interaction means that the pension election decision at retirement is not just a decision about current income. It is a decision that shapes what the government pension offset does to Social Security survivor benefits years later. Couples approaching a government pension retirement decision who understand this interaction can evaluate the trade-off between higher current pension income and lower future offset impact and make an informed choice rather than discovering the interaction after the fact. If your spouse is approaching retirement from a government pension job and has not yet made a pension election, this calculation deserves explicit attention before the election is finalized. The election becomes irrevocable in most pension systems at the point of retirement.
The window to consider how it interacts with the government pension offset closes the moment the pension begins. The third action, revisiting the Social Security claiming strategy for the higher-earning spouse, specifically in light of how survivor benefits are calculated. For couples where one spouse worked primarily in Social Security-covered employment and the other worked in non-covered government employment, the Social Security-covered spouse's benefit is the foundation from which the survivor benefit will be calculated before the government pension offset is applied to reduce it.
What this means strategically is that the higher the Social Security-covered spouse's benefit at the time of their death, the larger the survivor benefit baseline that the government pension offset is applied against. A survivor benefit that starts at $2,400 and is reduced by a $1,000 offset leaves $1,400 remaining. A survivor benefit that starts at $1,600 and is reduced by the same $1,000 offset leaves $600 remaining. The offset is fixed by the pension amount. The baseline is shaped by when the Social Security-covered spouse claimed. Delaying the Social Security-covered spouse's claim, even by 1 or 2 years past full retirement age, builds delayed retirement credits at approximately 8% per year that permanently increase the benefit and therefore permanently increase the survivor benefit baseline from which the offset is subtracted. On a benefit that the offset will substantially reduce, those additional delayed credits can be the difference between the surviving spouse receiving a meaningful monthly amount and receiving almost nothing. This strategy, delaying the higher-earning covered spouse's Social Security claim specifically to build a larger survivor benefit baseline, is one of the most consistently underused tools available to couples navigating the government pension offset situation. And it is consistently underused because nobody explains the interaction clearly enough for couples to connect these dots while both spouses are still here and the claiming decision is still being made. Log in to SSA.gov and look at your current benefit estimates at different claiming ages. Look specifically at the difference between claiming at full retirement age and claiming at 70. Then consider how that difference interacts with the government pension offset given your household's specific pension situation. The math is not complicated once you have the numbers in front of you. What has been complicated is finding someone who explains why the
specific numbers matter in this specific context. Here is the bottom line on the provision I described today. The government pension offset is in the law. The windfall elimination provision is in the law. They apply when the conditions that trigger them exist, and for millions of households with at least one spouse who worked in non-covered government employment, those conditions exist right now. The question is not whether these provisions apply. The question is whether the couples they apply to find out in time to plan around them or find out afterward when planning is no longer an option. SSA does not send a letter to couples in this situation explaining what is coming. The pension office does not coordinate with SSA to make sure the interaction is understood before the election is made. Nobody proactively walks a surviving spouse through the offset calculation before they need to live inside it. SSA now does. So here is what to do today. If either spouse has worked in a government job not covered by Social Security, call SSA at 1-800-772-1213 and request a government pension offset calculation specific to your household situation. If a government pension election has not yet been made, evaluate the joint and survivor annuity options explicitly in the context of how they affect the offset calculation, and review the Social Security claiming timeline for the covered spouse with survivor benefit baseline protection as an explicit part of the decision. The provision is hidden only because nobody explained it. Now it is not hidden anymore. If SSA Now gave you information today that could protect your household from a benefit reduction nobody warned you was coming, subscribe to this channel and turn on the bell. Every provision in Social Security law that affects your retirement income without announcing itself, I find, I explain, and I bring here while there is still time to respond to it. And share this video with every married couple you know right now. The provision I described today is in their situation too, whether they know it or not.